We continue Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough. We are in Pyrrhus. I guess we're in the second program here. Demetrius married her. At the great battle of Ipsus, where so many kings were engaged, Pyrrhus taking part with Demetrius, though yet but a youth, routed those that encountered him, and highly signalized himself among all the soldiery, and afterwards, when Demetrius's fortunes were low, he did not forsake him, but secured for him the cities of Greece with which he was entrusted, and upon articles of agreement being made between Demetrius and Ptolemy, when he went over as a hostage for him into Egypt, were both in hunting and in other exercises he gave Ptolemy an ample proof of his courage and strength, here observing Berenice in greatest power, and of all Ptolemy's wives, highest in esteem for virtue and understanding. He made his court principally to her. He had a particular art of gaining over the great to his own interest, as on the other hand he readily overlooked such as were below him, and being also well behaved and temperate in his life, among all the young princes then at court, he was thought most fit to have Antigone for his wife, one of the daughters of Berenice by Philip, before she married Ptolemy. After this match, advancing in honor, and Antigone being a very good wife to him, having procured a sum of money and raised an army, he so ordered matters as to be sent into his kingdom of Pyrrhus, and arrived there to the great satisfaction of many. From their hate to Neoptolemus, who was governing in a violent and arbitrary way, but fearing lest Neoptolemus should enter into alliance with some neighboring princes. But fearing lest Neoptolemus should enter into alliance with some neighboring princes, he came to terms and friendship with him, agreeing that they should share the government between them. There were people, however, who, as time went on, secretly exasperated them, and fomented jealousies between them. The cause chiefly moving Pyrrhus is said to have had this beginning. It was customary for the kings to offer sacrifice to Mars at Pesaro, a place in the Molossian country, and that done to enter into a solemn covenant with the Epirots, they to govern according to the law, these to preserve the government as by law established. This was performed in the presence of both kings, who were there with their immediate friends, giving and receiving many presents. Here Gello, one of the friends of Neoptolemus, taking Pyrrhus by the hand, presented him with 2 pair of draught oxen. There's sometimes the letter missing in the printing, or 2. 2 pair of draught oxen. Bertillus, his cupbearer, being then by, begged these of Pyrrhus, who, not giving them to him, but to another, Bertillus extremely resented it, which Gello took notice of, and inviting him to a banquet, amidst drinking and other excesses, as some relate, Bertillus being then in the flower of his youth, he entered into discourse, persuading him to adhere to Neoptolemus, and destroy Pyrrhus by poison. Bertillus received the design, appearing to approve and consent to it, but privately discovered it to Pyrrhus, who, by command, he recommended Alexicrates, his chief cupbearer, to Gello, as a fit instrument for their designs. Pyrrhus, being very desirous to have proof of the plot by several evidences, so Gello, being deceived, Neoptolemus, who was no less deceived, imagining the design went prosperously on, could not forbear, but in his joy spoke of it among his friends, and once at an entertainment at his sister Catime's, talked openly of it, thinking none heard but themselves, nor was any one there but Phaerata, the wife of Saman, who had the care of Neoptolemus's flocks and herds. She, turning her face towards the wall upon a couch, seemed fast asleep, and having heard all that passed unsuspected, next day came to Antigone, Pyrrhus's wife, and told her what she had heard Neoptolemus say to his sister. Now, by inherent morality, you could say, as long as you're not covering up a crime, the trust between the the spouses and family and stuff, but the workers, you can say they're on those terms, but that's only on a legal basis, right? Although they should generally state their word, but if there's plots and stuff going on, perhaps, on understanding which Pyrrhus for the present said little, but on a sacrifice day, making an invitation for Neoptolemus, kill him, being satisfied before that the great men of Epirus were his friends, and that they were eager for him to rid himself of Neoptolemus, and not to content himself with a mere petty share of the government, but to follow his own natural vocation to great designs, and now when a just ground of suspicion appeared, to anticipate Neoptolemus by taking him off first. And, okay, maybe the last part, but definitely not, I want more control in the government, I have to kill people. People are, leaders are definitely still doing that around the world. Some of the, no, we don't do that in America. We kind of do. And, well, I mean, not me, but, yeah, whether it's an individual or a collective basis of fighting for land control and, defend your land, but, you're not trying to extend borders and stuff like that. And it works on an individual basis, too. It's not, not just the war at large. Because it does sound like it was mostly motivated by political reasons rather than political crime. In memory of Berenice and Ptolemy, he named his son by Antigone Ptolemy, and having built a city in the peninsula of Epirus, called it Berenices. From this time he began to revolve many and vast projects in his thoughts. But his first special hope and design lay near home, and he found means to engage himself in the Macedonian affairs under the following pretext: of Cassander's sons, Antipater, the eldest, killed Thessalonica, his mother, expelled his brother Alexander, who sent to Demetrius, entreating his assistance, and also called in Pyrrhus, but Demetrius, being retarded by multitude of business, Pyrrhus, coming first, demanded in reward of his service the districts called Tymphaa and Parauaa in Macedon itself, and of their new conquest, Ambracia, Acarnania, and Amphilochia. And Amphilochia. And nowadays it's, some people who are smarter, mostly people who just think they are smarter than everybody, but people who are smarter, social media practically makes them retarded. Or the official media, right? Because they're just, it keeps them from fulfilling the basic stuff that they should do because their intelligence is used up. They don't have the intelligence for the base of their life. The young prince, giving away, he took possession of these countries and secured them with good garrisons, and proceeded to reduce for Alexander himself other parts of the kingdom, which he gained from Antipater. Lysimachus, designing to send aid to Antipater, was involved in much other business, but knowing Pyrrhus would not disoblige Ptolemy or deny him anything, send pretended letters to him from Ptolemy, desiring him to give up his expedition. Upon payment of 300 talents to him by Antipater, Pyrrhus, opening the letter, quickly discovered the fraud of Lysimachus, for it had not the accustomed style of salutation. The father to the son, health, but King Ptolemy to Pyrrhus, the king, health. And approaching Lysimachus, he, notwithstanding, made a peace, and they all met to confirm it by a solemn oath upon sacrifice, a goat, a bull, and a ram being brought out. The ram on a sudden fell dead. The others laughed, but Theodotus the prophet forbade Pyrrhus to swear, declaring that heaven by that portended the death of one of the 3 kings, upon which he refused to ratify the peace. And well, they're all critters that can ram at you. The bull's more deadly, but just more force. The ram, yeah, it has its horns and whatnot, but it's so what? Well, so salt would be the goat, sulfur would be the bull, and the ram would be Mercury. Well, not that simple, but yeah. The affairs of Alexander being now in some kind of settlement, Demetrius arrived contrary as soon appeared to the desire, and indeed not without the alarm of Alexander. After they had been a few days together, their mutual jealousy led them to conspire against each other, and Demetrius, taking advantage of the first occasion, was beforehand with the young king, and slew him, and proclaimed himself king of Macedon. There had been formerly no very good understanding between him and Pyrrhus, for besides the inroads he made into Thessaly, the innate disease of princes' ambition of greater empire had rendered them formidable and suspected neighbors to each other, especially since Diademia's death, and both having seized Macedon, they came into conflict for the same object, and the difference between them had the stronger motives, Demetrius, having first attacked the Attalians and subdued them, left Pantaucus there with a considerable army and marched direct against Pyrrhus, and Pyrrhus, as he thought, against him, but by mistake of the ways they passed by one another, and Demetrius, falling into Pyrrhus, wasted the country, and Pyrrhus, meeting with Pantaucus, prepared for an engagement. The soldiers fell to, and there was a sharp and terrible conflict, especially where the generals were. Pantaucus, in courage, dexterity, and strength of body, being confessedly the best of all Demetrius's captains, and having both resolution and high spirit, challenged Pyrrhus to fight, hand to hand. On the other side, Pyrrhus, professing not to yield to any king in valor and glory, and esteeming the fame of Achilles more truly to belong to him for his courage than for his blood, advancing against Pantaucus through the front of the army. First they used their lances, then came to a close fight and managed their swords both with art and force, Pyrrhus receiving one wound, but returning two for it, one in the thigh and the other near the neck, repulsed and overthrew Pantaucus, but did not kill him outright, as he was rescued by his friends. But the Epirots, exulting the victory of their king and admiring his courage, forced through and cut in pieces the phalanx of the Macedonians, and pursuing those that fled, killed many and took 5,000 prisoners. This fight did not so much exasperate the Macedonians with anger for their loss, or with hatred to Pyrrhus, as it caused esteem and admiration of his valor, and great discourse of him among those that saw what he did, and were and and were engaged against him in the action. They thought his countenance, his swiftness, and his motions expressed those of the great Alexander, and that they beheld there an image and resemblance of his rapidity and strength in fight. Other kings merely by their purple and their guards, by the formal bending of their necks and lofty tone of their speech. Pyrrhus, only by arms and in action, represented Alexander, of his knowledge of military tactics and the art of a general, and his great ability. That way we have the best information from the commentaries he left behind him. Antigonus also, we are told, being asked who was the greatest soldier, said Pyrrhus, if he lives to be old, referring only to those of his own time. But Hannibal, of all great commanders, esteemed Pyrrhus for skill and conduct the first, Scipio the second, and himself the third, as is related in the life of Scipio. In a word, he seemed ever to make this all his thought and philosophy, as the most kingly part of learning. Other curiosities he held to in no account. He is reported when asked at a feast whether he thought Pathon or Kiphysias the best musician, to have said Palasperchon was the best soldier, as though it became a king to examine and understand only such things. Towards his familiars he was mild and not easily incensed, zealous and even vehement in returning kindness. Thus, when Arapus was dead, he could not bear it with moderation, saying he indeed had suffered what was common to human nature, but condemning and blaming himself that by puttings off and delays he had not returned his kindness in time. For our debts may be satisfied to the creditor's errors, but not to have made the acknowledgment of received favors, while they to whom it is due can be sensible of it, afflicts a good and worthy nature. Some thinking it fit that Pyrrhus should banish a certain ill-tongued fellow in Ambracia, who had spoken very incidentally of him. Let him rather, said he, speak against us here to a few, than rambling about to a great many. And others who in their wine had made reflections upon him, being afterwards questioned for it, and asked by him whether they had said such words, on one of the young fellows answering, yes, all that king, and should have said more if we had more wine. He laughed and discharged them after Antigon's death, he married several wives to enlarge his interest and power. He had the daughter of Autoleon, of Autoleon, king of the Paonians, Birkenna, Bardalis, the Illyrians' daughter, Lanassa, daughter of the Agathocles, the Saracusan, who brought with her in dower the city of Corcyra, which had been taken by Agathocles. By Antigone he had Ptolemy, Alexander by Lanassa, and Helenus, his youngest son, by Birkenna. He brought them up, all in arms, hot and eager youths, and by him sharpened and whetted to war from their very infancy. It is said, when one of them, while yet a child, asked him to which he would leave the kingdom, he replied, to him that had the sharpest sword, which indeed was much like that tragical curse of Oedipus to his sons. Not by the lot decide, but within the sword the heritage divide. And really better to have by principle fixed shares, more or less regardless. Now, if they end up being of a different spiritual path, it's understandable. And I don't mean the sectarian stuff, but so unsocial and wild beast-like is the nature of ambition and cupidity. After this battle, Pyrrhus, returning gloriously home, enjoyed his fame and reputation, and being called Eagle by the Epirots, by you, said he, I am an eagle, for how should I not be such, while I have your arms as wings to sustain me? A little after, having intelligence that Demetrius was dangerously sick, he entered on a sudden into Macedonia, intending only an incursion, and to harass the country. But he was very near seizing upon all and taking the kingdom within a blow. He marched as far as Edessa, unresisted, great numbers deserting and coming in to him. This danger excited Demetrius beyond his strength, and his friends and commanders in a short time got a considerable army together, and with all their forces briskly attacked Pyrrhus, who, coming only to pillage, would not stand to fight, but retreating, lost part of his army. As he went off, by the close pursuit of the Macedonians, Demetrius, however, although he had easily and quickly forced Pyrrhus out of the country, yet did not slight him, but having resolved upon great designs, and to recover his father's kingdom with an army of 100,000 men and a fleet of 500 ships, would neither embroil himself with Pyrrhus, nor leave the Macedonians so active and troublesome a neighbor, and since he had no leisure to continue the war with him, he was willing to treat and conclude a peace, and to turn his forces upon the other kings, articles being agreed upon. I presume that's the word that's partially missing. The designs of Demetrius quickly discovered themselves by greatness of his preparation, and the other kings, being alarmed, sent to Pyrrhus ambassadors and letters, expressing their wonder that he should choose to let his own opportunity pass by, and wait till Demetrius could use his, and whereas he was now able to chase him out of Macedon, involved in designs, and disturbed he should expect till Demetrius at leisure, and grown great, should bring the war home to his own door, and make him fight for his temples and sepulchres in Malacia, especially having so lately by his means lost Corcyra and his wife together, for Lanassa had taken offence at Pyrrhus for too great an inclination to those wives of his that were barbarians, and so withdraw to Corcyra, and desiring to marry some king, invited Demetrius, knowing of all the kings he was most ready to entertain offers of marriage. So he sailed thither, married Lanassa, and placed a garrison in the city. The kings, having written thus to Pyrrhus, themselves contrived to find Demetrius's work while he was delaying and making his preparations. But Dilemma, setting out with a great fleet, drew off many of the Greek cities. Lysimachus, out of Thrace, wasted the upper Macedon, and Pyrrhus, also taking arms at the same time, marched to Pyrrhus, expecting, as it fell out, that Demetrius, collecting his forces against Lysimachus, would leave the lower country undefended. That very night he seemed in his sleep to be called by Alexander the Great, and approaching saw him sick abed, but was received with very kind words and much respect, and promised zealous assistance. He making bold to reply, "How, sir, can you, being sick, assist me? With my name," said he, and mounting the Sa'an horse, seemed to lead the way. At the sight of this vision, he was much assured, and with swift marches, overrunning all the adjacent places, takes Pyrrhus, and making his headquarters there, reduced the rest of the country by his commanders. When Demetrius received intelligence of this, and perceived likewise the Macedonians ready to mutiny in the army, he was afraid to advance further, lest, coming near Lysimachus, a Macedonian king and of great fame, they should revolt to him. So returning, he marched directly against Pyrrhus as a stranger, and hated by the Macedonians. But while he lay encamped there near him, many who came out of Pyrrhus definitely praised Pyrrhus as invincible in arms, a glorious warrior who treated those who he had taken kindly and humanely. Several of these Pyrrhus himself sent privately, pretending to be Macedonians, and saying, "Now is the time to be delivered from the severe government of Demetrius, by coming over to Pyrrhus, a gracious prince and a lover of soldiers." By this artifice a great part of the army was in a state of excitement, and the soldiers began to look every way about, inquiring for Pyrrhus. It happened he was without his helmet, till, understanding they did not know him, he put it on again, and was so quickly recognized by his lofty crest and the goat's horns he wore upon it. Then the Macedonians, running to him, desired to be told his password, and some put oaken boughs upon their heads, because they saw them warned by the soldiers about him. Some persons even took the confidence to say that Demetrius himself, that he would be well advised to withdraw and lay down the government, and he indeed, seeing the mutinous movements of the army to be only too consistent with what they said, privately got away, disguised in a broad hat and common soldier's coat. So Pyrrhus became master of the army without fighting, and was declared king of the Macedonians. But Lysimachus, now arriving and claiming the defeat of Demetrius as the joint exploit of them both, and that therefore the kingdom should be shared between them, Pyrrhus, not as yet quite assured of the Macedonians, and in doubt of their faith, consented to the proposition of Lysimachus, and divided the country and cities between them accordingly. This was for the present useful, and prevented war. But shortly after they found the partition not so much a peaceful settlement as an occasion of further complaint and difference, for men whose ambition neither seas nor mountains nor unpeopled deserts can limit, nor the bounds of dividing Europe from Asia, which in different times is thought of something different. It's like, oh, was it over by Turkey or is it over by Afghanistan? Racially and ethically, it kind of makes more sense that, the five tribes the Hindus and the Persians split, so the Persians were one tribe and kind of, and there's other reasons culturally and stuff to have that division. But Asia actually being, the not what we call Asia, but I mean, if you look at it in Greek, like in the Bible and stuff, combine their vast desires, it would be hard to expect to forbear from injuring one another when they touch and are close to each other. These are ever naturally at war, envying and seeking advantages of one another, and merely make use of these two words, peace and war, like current coin to serve their occasions, not as justice but as expediency suggests, and are really better men when they openly enter on war than when they give to the mere forbearance from doing wrong, for want of opportunity, the sacred names of justice and friendship. Pyrrhus was an instant of this, for setting himself against the rise of Demetrius again, and endeavoring to hinder the recovery of his power, as it were, from a kind of sickness, he assisted the Greeks, and came to Athens, where, having ascended the Acropolis, he offered sacrifice to what was considered to be the goddess there, and at the same day, Athena, came down again. He told the Athenians he was much gratified by the goodwill and the confidence they had shown to him, but if they were wise, he advised them never to let any king come thither again or open their city gates to him. He concluded also a peace with Demetrius, but shortly after he was gone into Asia, at the persuasion of Lysimachus, he tampered with the Thessalians to revolt, and besieged his cities in Greece, finding he could better preserve the attachment of the Macedonians in war than in peace, and being of his own inclination not much given to rest. And see, it's obvious it's not what we mean by Asia. It's still